first question is, as a woman co-founder of Unicorn in India, how has your journey been? Or what? And if you look at if you compare the women entrepreneurship landscape, and if you just do a comparison between markets like India and China, number of top self-made women entrepreneurs, such as yourself, who has created valuable businesses and who has significant ownership in the business, running it to the said valuation is comparatively lesser compared to, let's say, China and the US. And so I just want to get from your perspective, how do you think about it? What is the evolution and what are your perspectives?
Yeah, so for one, I think a lot of corporations understand, accept that diversity is no longer a feminist notion. It's almost a corporate agenda now. So I think it can be attained if it is thought about consciously from the inception of the company, and it should not be treated as an afterthought. Because it's much easier to ensure diversity in an organization if there is a good balance in the top management. Like if a company has a good representation of women since inception, then the balance is usually put in place without putting any major effort. So let me take the example of Byju's. So we have a 33% representation on the board, 50% representation in the top management. So this trickles down to every level, resulting in a 40% representation of women overall across levels. So one is that, and I think having a lot of women in top management, gives a lot of strong women role models out there, who can become a source of inspiration and motivation for young girls to look up to and aspire. Because if you look at around the age that I am in is when family sets in, the responsibility comes. You have almost 50% of the women leaving workforce, a marginal number joining back, and then again half of them leaving. So I think if there can be enough women in top management who can inspire other women, who can tell them this can be done, I think that will ensure that many more people are looking up and trying to make it to the top. And B, also, if we have more women, it's also that there is balance ensured in the organization, because enough studies have shown that women like to surround themselves, have a propensity to hire more women to support them in all the roles that they do. So one is that, and as you rightly said, there is a lack of women representation in senior leadership. A quarter of global businesses actually have no women in senior management roles. So this actually just sets up a wrong notion to men and women across the globe that women just cannot be there in top roles. I think according to Credit Suisse, it's marginally increased women's representation in boardrooms. It's increased by 4.3% from 2014 to 2019. I'm talking about India. So hovering around 15.2% is where we are today. So I think while a lot is being done to address diversity, a few core things that should change in the mindset of not just people in an organization, and I always say that, but people at home even. Because every woman takes support, confidence from another woman at home, be it their mother, their sister, their mother-in-law, and they're all a reflection of the belief that their family holds in them. And nothing is ever achieved alone. So I think a lot has to be done to dispel the notion that women take care while men take charge. There is a lot more to do, and there's a lot more that can be done.
Yeah, so connecting it back to your story, Divya, what was the founding years of Byju's, and what were the kind of conversations? If you could tell me, what were the kind of conversations that you had with your co-founder, and then the businesses grew, then the funding, the growth. So if you could just take us through a little bit of your journey in terms of start to as of now, that'd be great.
Yeah, so I actually started out as a teacher. I was one of Byju's students, like we are the co-founding team of Byju's. Everybody, the top 8-10 of us, we're all his students, and we're all students. Then we all became teachers. So I think we understood both the need for a product that we have created, and we've also been on the other side where we've created that. So I'll probably come to how we did it. That being said, I think in terms of the growth, we've never really been afraid to positively disrupt ourselves. So if you look at how we started, right, we were completely offline, 100% offline. We were 100% services. Prior to 2015, we had probably the largest offline classrooms in the world, with 25,000 students sitting together in a stadium.
Now, I know, yeah.
Yeah, but when we launched our app in 2015, where we leveraged technology as an enabler, we completely disrupted ourselves. We became, and today we're 100% product, we're 100% online. So I think and that too, you're in a new segment. EdTech is a new segment. There's no playbook for success. You can't go by rules. You can't copy paste. Here you have to do everything on your own. So I think following first principles is what matters a lot. So if you want me to put it in perspective, I think we always like to define ourselves as a core content, a core education company. We've always used tech as an enabler to enable the reach of our content, also to make it better. Now, why we did this was, as you must be knowing, India has 260 million school-going kids. It's the largest education system in the world, but we still rank very low in major global assessments. And the reason for this is actually threefold. If you just break it up, one is, I think, lack of access to high quality learning, teachers, educators, and institutions. Two, it's a one size fits all approach, which makes it abysmal lack of personalization, if you put it that way. And I think three, and most important, is a fear of exams rather than the love for learning. So what we did at Byju's is that whatever learning programs we created, whatever products we created, we always did that to address these kind of needs, and with the core mission of making students love learning. We actually noticed that there was a huge gap in the way students learn concepts and how concepts can actually be learned. So our aim has been make learning accessible, make learning effective, make it engaging, make it personalized, and do that by using the right combination of pedagogy, media, and tech. So when I say media, I'm actually talking about the interactive media, the one that we see in movies where we use a lot of animations and 3D, but also having a teacher there. So when you do all of this, it makes it easy to connect to the student. I've been a teacher myself. I think tech has made me a better teacher. It makes learning so much more interactive. It makes the delivery of concepts so much more actually easier. And it also personalizes the way students learn. So that, and technology, as I said, because now 70% of our youth actually has access to a smartphone. By integrating technology in education, you are actually enabling the best teachers to take maybe classes from one room or one office in one part of the country to every corner of the world. So, and coming to that, I know that there is a lot, and now because of what happened in COVID, there is this major inflection point in EdTech. But online learning is not just about digitizing offline learning, right? There should be a lot of innovation that is brought about in the way the content is delivered, the way content is consumed. And I think being in a new segment like ours means there's so much to do every day. And like I said in the beginning, there's no playbook for success. You need to be flexible. You need to be open. You need to be open to experiment, fail multiple times, but then have little failures and be very hands-on so that you realize when you fail small and win big. I think that's that. So.
Yeah. So coming back to the founding process. So when you discussed the incorporation and setting up Byju's and so on, what was your what were the roles that you wanted when you decided to start the business, and how did it transform over a period? It's more from a perspective that I'm sure there'll be a lot of women founders who were talking about setting up a business, and there could be discussions and so on. So I mean, it'd be great if you can. Just give a brief on. Yeah.
So, very frankly, I'll tell you, in any startup, you can't define your role. Even today, if somebody says, what is your role, I find it very difficult to summarize it, because you can't just do one thing. So when we started, we did everything, right? We taught, we collected payments, we marketed, we sold, we provided support, and I think it's important. That's very integral to learning how to set up a company. None of us were experts in finance. None of us were experts in HR. None of us were experts in product, right? But we've learned along the way, because I think, when you feel the pulse of what you do and you're very passionate about what you want to do. And I think if we do not, if we do not define our passion and let our passion define us, I think at that point of time, you start learning so many new skill sets. Yeah. Like today, I think, the profession of a teacher and what it can do to a person is very underrated. Like, frankly, I think being a teacher has helped me a lot in the personality that I've developed today. And it's a very, very critical job, next to that of a doctor. if you ask me, one person is saving someone's life today, and a teacher is actually setting someone's future right. So it's a very a big responsibility. So I can say that, you know, why I'm talking about teacher in specific is because that's how I started. I was 21 when I taught for the first time. I still remember my first class. I think Baiju had a lot of confidence in us. It's not that I had prior teaching experience. Of course, you're not going to have it at the age of 21, but I think he saw that spark in us, that we could, you know, impact students, help engage them, and you know, make them like learning. And that's what we've always wanted to do. So when I was pushed into the class, I wore a sari because, you know, I had to look at least 3 to 4 years older than the thing. And I really enjoyed it. In fact, I had plans to go abroad and study because I did my graduation in engineering, and I wanted to do masters in that, but that changed with the minute when I realized that this is the impact I want to create. I'm helping so many students learn. What more am I going to do? And if I study and come back, I'll probably just lose 2 years of my life. You know, if I was going to follow that as my stream, it would have made sense. But since I kind of decided that this is where my calling lies, this is where happiness lies, that's where I decided. So I think go by gut instinct, and I've actually always followed instinct, be it anything. And I think all of us, right? I'm not just talking for myself. All of us have always followed our heart. We've always followed that. If you think that this is the right way to do it, then go and do it. Because we like I said, right? EdTech, and it's what we've seen in the last 6 months is nothing like what EdTech was in the last many years. And probably when we talk about COVID and all, I can talk about that. But then all I would like to say is that, and always be open to learn. We learned so many new things along the way. And I think we never let success get to our head. We believe every day that we have a long way to go. We're just at 3%. In terms of you know, the number of students we've reached. There's so much to do. So I think we're learning every day, and that's where it comes from.
So coming back to the question, no. So when you started, you said we'll do everything and split work, whatever that comes our way. Then as you progressed, then did you come up with suggestions on, you know, I want to take this part of the business, I will focus on X, Y, Z, because it's become it's possibly one of the most valuable private business in India now. So, and what kind of, and it's a very interesting question as such, because as you told me, you started as a teacher, then you became an entrepreneur. So you would have learned a lot of things while working. So sort of become specialist by being generalist, no? So then what did you, how did you come about deciding what role you would like to perform, and how did you discuss with the board about that and all?
Yeah, so like there is no formal discussion with the board. Like
I just
it's like, I think, so like if you ask me, I'm a very hands-on person. I like to do things. So today I along with teaching, I also and while we are on the board, I also take care of branding, a lot of marketing, and user experience, in the sense that, you know, if a student is using the product, are they using it in the most beneficial way for them? Are they aware of all the features? Are they using? So I think, and this is something that I really like to do, because it gives you direct feedback on how well you're doing. We're paranoid about you know, the way students use our product, and those are the two numbers. Like, so if you look at all the business numbers, we have two numbers that we closely track. Are one is engagement, and one is the renewal number, right? The annual renewal number. So that, I think, has always been on our mind since day one. So students come to our app almost in the last few months, it's almost 100 minutes per session, and they're coming almost every day. And that actually shows that, you know, they like learning like this, and this is one of their mainstream ways to learn. And I think among renewals, we've seen 85% of annual renewal. So this means that it's effective, because you see your user, that is your student, and your purchaser are two different people. It's your parent who's ultimately going to purchase. So unless they see that it's effective for the children, they're not gonna buy it. So I think these are the two numbers that I have always looked at very closely, because it shows whether your product is being used, shows how useful it is. Are you addressing a need? Right. So I think these are the kind of the channels, and that's always been my interest. So along with teaching, these are the two areas that I kind of focus on.
Got it. So over your last so many years of journey in Byju's, right? What was your the best thing, the best, what are the best moments that you had and which you were very excited? I mean, I was very excited when I got the news, when we heard the news that the Facebook is, when the Mark Zuckerberg Foundation is investing. I mean, it's really cool to know that a company founded by, somebody from Kerala, co-founded somebody from Kerala is getting that. I was very proud and happy about it. So what was yours when it comes to the story? Yeah.
So I think we've been very fortunate to have investors who are very strong partners, and they've supported us along the way, and that's really helped. But in terms of happiest moments, I would say there'll be so many, because for us every day is an adventure, and every day we're trying to do do something new in a different way. So I maybe cannot pinpoint one exact moment, but maybe the first time we launched the app, and because that was a big shift from the way we were doing things to the way we're going to do things now in the future. So it was a turning point. Whenever there was a turning point in, should I wait? So there will be many moments. One, I think, would be the time when we decided, that the day we launched our app, probably, because I'm sure none of us knew that it's going to be used by 60 million kids, but we knew that we were onto something big, and that would be one. Then probably even as unfortunate as the last few months have been, I think it's been very professionally challenging as well as satisfying, because we're all working from home for the first time, but I was so proud by the way in which every team has literally stepped up. And if not as we've launched more features on the app which can help students continue to learn seamlessly from home, and we're all doing this remotely, right? We're all apart, but yet we're together. So that would be the second big thing which I could probably talk about. So I think it's moments like this, and also I think as a teacher there are a lot of mini moments when students call on our helpline, and there was this child from Kashmir who called and told us that his school is shut down at that point of time. It's not because of COVID, but the general situation, and then they were able to continue learning because of us. And there was another time when a girl called in from Kesod, Gujarat, which is a village, remote place, where and she said that her parents are scared to send her outside the house for tuitions because of safety, but she's able to continue learning. And her mother said that if she had something like this, she would have been something else in life.
Nice.
I think, you can't really say that. All these mini moments is what makes you feel grateful for what you do. It makes you feel very happy about the work that you're doing.
It's really, really cool. I mean, touching so many lives in an impactful manner is really cool. We wish we were in a business like that. One question: have you met Mark Zuckerberg and Mark Zuckerberg of Facebook? Have you met them personally?
I think no, I couldn't go. I think because I was carrying. Baiju had gone the last time around, and he's met them. Yes, of course we have to meet them. Others.
So just want to know how your experience is, and is there anything that you can share on that? Anyway, that's okay. Now, before you wind up on your company side of things, just last question on that. What role do you like the most, as a teacher or as an entrepreneur? Which role is your favorite? I think, you can say, yeah.
Okay, whether it's a teacher or, okay. So, you're asking me about specifically the last few months because I've been teaching more?
No, generally, what do you like to, you like your role as a teacher, or you like your role as an entrepreneur?
Okay, so
you're teaching,
Yeah, okay, I got it. So see, the thing is, teaching has always been my first love of a job, and I've been teaching since the age of 21, like I said. So, and I've also been taking a lot of classes off late for the latest Byju's classes product, which I spoke about. So, see, the thing is, I can't really choose, because I think both of them, both create an impact, right, to so many learners. It's a good feeling. One is an individual impact, the other one is a team impact. So like I was just mentioning to you, as a team we've been working seamlessly from home. Everyone is punching way above their weight, especially the last few months. All of us are apart but still bound in this mission together. We launched a bunch of new features in record time. We introduced history, civics, geography. We introduced the app in so many regional languages so that we're able to reach many more students. And then we launched, like, so I think, you can't really say, because one, like I said, right, it's an overall impact. The other one is an individual impact, but both are equally important. And so I can always say, like, I'm a teacher by passion. So it'll remain very close to my heart. I love teaching. So today, in fact, because my son is learning from home, I teach him also. And so I'm enjoying every bit of it. I think after my maternity break, which I took 6 years back for 3 months, that time it was 3 months. So this is the first time I'm at home for this much time. So I think it's nice because I'm part of his learning life. He's part of my working life. So it kind of fits in. So I'm seeing myself as a teacher there also. So.
Nice.
And a parent is a child's first teacher. So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And now let's talk about COVID. I mean, we have to speak about COVID. How was the experience been? It's just a surreal experience. That do you see some kind of first you tell me, how was it personally and professionally for you?
So when during the beginning of the outbreak, I think the impact was huge. Most of the schools around the world were shut. As per UNESCO, they said 1.3 billion kids are outside school, right? So the first thing we actually did is that we we opened up our app for free, and we encouraged many students to come onto the platform and continue learning. We also launched free live classes. So by free live classes, I mean that we give students scheduled learning on the app, which was a new feature. We didn't have it till then. And this from the same teachers on our app. So they're getting what they missed, especially at that point of time, access to quality learning from some of the best teachers in the country. So this was one thing which we did. And I think what the last few months have done have actually been an inflection point for EdTech. To put it in terms of numbers, we saw 40 million students on our platform in the first 4 years after our app launch, and we saw 20 million users just in the last 4 months. So 50% of our users have come in the last 4 months. So I think this is a very strong indication that there is a paradigm shift in the mindset of all stakeholders in education, parents, students, teachers, institutions. Everybody is taking to online learning, and there is a lot of awareness which has been created, and I think what did not happen in decades is happening in months and happening in weeks right now. So, and like I also mentioned to you, I think more importantly, engagement has been at an all-time high. We see students spending almost 100 minutes on the app per session, and more importantly, coming every day. So I think that, because students are realizing that they're getting a front row seat for the first time, right? There are no more backbenchers. And all of us and teachers are also realizing the advantage of tech tools. So together, I think everyone's becoming better learners and better teachers.
Oh, amazing. I mean, these are all really cool strategies. And what about the recent acquisition? Any thoughts on why you did that, and what was your, if you could share a couple of lines.
Yeah, so it's an amazing team, and I think it's in line with our expansion plans of increasing our TAM, which we plan to do by having more products or subjects, more grades, and more geographies and languages. So I think coding is slowly becoming actually mainstream. It enhances critical thinking. It's adding a subject. I think it's also a future skill. So it was in line with what we plan to do in our future, and plus it also accelerated our expansion plans abroad. So this was that's the kind of reason that we integrated White Hat into our team, and
I mean, it's actually a quite interesting, very good company, and I think a couple of my family, kids and all use it. And they have very good feedback about it. And so next thing is I just want to briefly touch on your thoughts on philanthropy. You're already impacting a lot of lives through your business model in itself, because getting one of the problems that we see from an Indian developmental perspective is the lack of education. And when you look at the Huron philanthropy list, the most favored case for philanthropists is also education, because of education not easily being available to everyone. And you're exactly doing that. So it becomes a very impactful business proposition from your value proposition itself, right? Now, and so have you thought about philanthropy other than what you're doing right now, which is basically impact? Have you thought about philanthropy or any favorite courses that you are keen on? Have you thought about all that?
Yeah. So so as you rightly said, I think, companies can achieve social good, in two ways. One, it could be integrated into their model itself, that is in their core proposition, their product, and that product could create an impact which benefits society. In this case, it's education. And I think education is one segment where, where you do well, you do good, you do good, you do well. So that is that. Now, apart from that, the secondary way is also by infusing money into a particular channel that you believe in, and then making that grow. So we've been thinking about doing it. We have plans in place. We have strong plans. The first one is something that is an automatic result of what we do. But we are planning to tie up with multiple NGOs. We are planning to give out our product for free. We're planning to impact many more people. Because see, the thing is, people talk a lot about digital divide. They say that okay, online learning is there, but then what about the digital divide where people do not have access to even internet, right? But then my answer to that is, you just think about what is more difficult to do. Is it more difficult to actually set up a brick and mortar school, or is it actually easier to enable internet and give somebody access to high quality learning? It's actually much easier to do the second thing. So I think even in the long term, the whole area of online education, if anything, is the only thing which can bridge this sort of divide that we have at all in people who have access to it and not. So yes, we are definitely thinking about doing it, and like you rightly said, we are in a segment where our product automatically creates an impact, but we're working on many more ways where many more students, be it more languages, be it in more going to deeper parts of the country, all of that is on the cards, and we have plans for it.
Can I ask you a question? Maybe it may not be a part of the interview, but then, so quite a few of these entrepreneurs in the various lists that we do, they are big spenders on education. For example, I was in a discussion with the HCL team HCL last week with Ms. Nada and the team, and they have amazing schools across remotest part of UP, and it's under this scheme called Shiksha, and I've been to one of those schools about 4 or 5 years back when they invited me, and it's amazing what they do, and I really believe that I mean, from what you're telling me, it'd be good to possibly work with these foundations, and I'm sure they've and possibly push this kind of opportunity. Have you thought about that? Are you working with any entrepreneur?
That's what we are doing. Yeah. Maybe it's a little too early to get to the names right now, but we are. We have very strong plans in place, like I said, and we are working with organizations, companies, foundations, all of them.
Yeah, makes sense. Absolutely. Yeah, because the lack of good teachers is the problem in these kind of schools. Yes. Okay, great to hear that. If at all you need, I mean, I'm sure you're connected to everyone. Yeah, if at all I come across someone, I'll be happy to introduce you and
please do that.
Discuss. Great. And the next question is, how do you think the education sector in India is transforming? And now this the students are, it was a difficult phase initially when parents were trying to somehow get the children to come and learn. But then now it's kind of become a new normal that, okay, you can even learn remotely. I mean, that's going to happen. So how do you think the education industry has transformed forever from 2020?
So
sector,
I think,
I'll say sector,
yeah,
not industry.
sector, right? Yeah. So I'll speak for the sector, because I think, for the entire education space itself, I think we're at that point in history where our classrooms are possibly changing for the first time in 100 years, right? It took a pandemic
Right.
for everybody to realize the impact of online learning, and overnight schools and colleges had to transform into an online education model or an online education platform. So, and if you look at it very interestingly, although tech has been there for ages, the changes we saw took less than 6 months to finally implement, right? Without yearly plans or anything. Like millions of learners, teachers, institutions, all of them, and thousands of institutions have actually transitioned into the new normal, like you put it. So I think because of the current crisis, one thing which has definitely happened is that almost everybody is getting introduced to the benefits of online learning, and what has not happened in years is happening in months. And online learning, I think, is here to stay. It will become an integral part of mainstream education. But if you ask me, is this going to be 100% online? Is our schools going to be 100% online? So when I speak for K to 12, right? Kids who are in the KG to 12,
Yeah.
where overall development is extremely important. So I believe no, it should definitely be a blended approach, which is a mix of online and offline. What do I mean by that? I mean that learning eventually will combine asynchronous online elements where students can study at their own pace, have some choices over their learning, engage deeply and critically with content, and mix that with synchronous learning where children can come and interact with each other, interact with their teachers. Because you see, especially in their formative years, social learning and subjects like sports, which is so important for the overall development of a child, can never be taught and learned online. So there will be subjects which will remain offline, and there will be core subjects like math, science, social studies, which I think everybody is realizing can actually be taught better and learned better when it's online. Because literally here, a student is getting a front row seat. Learning is becoming so much more effective. So I think that is kind of the future of learning. If you ask me, the future of learning is blended, neither online nor offline, but somewhere in between.
Yeah, but don't you think, it is sometimes difficult for parents to control their kids? For me, my wife and I were initially finding it so difficult for my daughter to sit in front of a computer and, look at, and sometimes it's very funny, right? You have the teacher teaching yoga over computer, and these are kids, they don't even understand
Exactly.
what's
So that's
going
what
on
I
on the
said.
screen.
See, yoga is something you can never teach online, right? Yoga is something which we are probably forced to put into the schedule today, or schools are forced to put into the schedule because it's part of their syllabus. Be it sports, right? They have even a physical education period. I know that because these are things which, I mean, how do you do it? How do you do it online? But if you think about it, there are subjects which we can do online, and why do I think, if you actually look at what technology has done to all of us, it's made our generations, the meaning of generation, shorter. There is a bigger generation gap between us and our kids in terms of the way they handle digital devices. They do all their learning from it. For them, it's a mainstream mode of content consumption. They learn their first letters from it. They learn their first numbers from it. So they use it like pros, unlike even us or even our parents. So I think as we go younger, they're more and more digital native. So learning is almost mainstream for them through a device, provided it is given in a format that they like it in. Now, obviously, if we try to teach them yoga on a computer, or we try to teach them football on a computer through a lesson, I mean, you can teach them theory, but to teach them practicals, where it's like a FIFA game, no? So you can always learn the game, you can learn the rules of the game, you can play with one more person, you can enjoy it to an extent, but to feel the pulse of the game, there's nothing like having people by your side. So I think it has to be, blended approach.
Okay. Now, final few questions. What are your hobbies? What do you do? Or you just love your business and just do that?
I know. So I am a health freak. So I swim, and my day starts with a swim. Unfortunately, nowadays I'm not able to do it because of COVID. So one definite thing is that I need to start my day with a workout, and I swim in the morning before I used to swim in the morning before I went to office. I'm also a singer, but nowadays but I used to sing professionally, but now I don't, because
professionally? I mean, you sung in movies.
No, on stage for various
Okay.
stages like Doordarshan and all of that. Not for movies, no. No,
Okay.
but before that, I was just 21 when I got into what I love doing. So
Yeah. So
yeah,
how many are? Yeah, and then so what time do you wake up every day, and what
so
time do you?
I'm an early riser. I get up by 6, and
Yeah.
then I start with the workout, and then
And
that's when I
and you
start
read.
my work. Yeah,
Yeah, and
I
you
read.
read a lot of books.
I
Yeah.
read books, but like, so, see, I'll tell you right now, it's also that I think visual media has become so powerful. Today, even news, we don't want to read the newspaper. We consume it using, television or digital media, even Instagram, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's so. So it's a combination of both. It would be sometimes on the newspaper, it would be sometimes on the phone, it would be sometimes on to know what's happening. But I think two things which I definitely don't miss out on is my health routine, and plus the thing is, when you have a child, they also get into your schedule, so you need to also make time for them and do justice, because now they're at home, they're not at school, so they're your responsibility. So you kind of need to manage all of that. So I won't say I'm getting too much of my time. It's okay, because it's something which I'm enjoying. Like I said, after a long time, I'm able to be a full-time parent and be a full-time person who's working from home. So yes, I'm happy about it.
Yeah. And what's your favorite book, if I may ask? What is the book that is really?
Yeah. So I really liked Sapiens.
Oh, I'm reading *Sapiens* now. Yeah.
Yes. So I really liked it, and
It has been my library for last 1 year. I've never read it. This is my 21st book this year. So I'm reading that now. Yeah. What a coincidence.
Okay.
Yeah. Sorry. Carry on.
I think that's one of the books which I really like, because it's very deep. It helps you realize a lot of things which you otherwise probably wouldn't. So I like that, and very surprisingly, I also like children's stories, because I believe they all have beautiful morals at the end. They show you that there's a rainbow at the end of every tunnel. So I think it's very nice to read them, and I'm reading them more because like I said, I read it to my son, so I'm exposed to a lot more children's stories than ever before, and I really like it. It awakens the child in you. So that, and apart from that, yeah, so I'll actually pick up whatever book comes my way. I'm not very particular about it, but one favorite right now in terms of adult books would be your Homo sapiens.
Yeah. And so in our unicorn list, in the 21 unicorns, I think from what we've understood, you're the only women co-founder of a unicorn company in India. There's nobody else that you could find, at least based on our research. Now, who's your favorite women entrepreneur who you look up to, and who inspires you?
So it's like, that's what I said, like the list is so small, right? That's what, when people think they should get like a bunch of names, no, that's what our aim should be.
So you will be one of them now.
No.
Yeah, you.
So I think there are, of course, there are so many people like who are there, of course. It could be Kiran Mazumdar-Shaw, it could be Arundhati, it could be I mean everybody. You can draw inspiration from everybody around you, be it men, be it women. Like, very frankly, I'll tell you, right? So it's I've never thought of it as that, you need to draw inspiration from another woman only. You can draw inspiration from anybody. In fact, inspiration starts at home. I would say my biggest inspiration will be my mother only, even though she's not an entrepreneur, but the way because my father's a doctor, she single-handedly managed me. I'm the only child. She was a full-time working mom who made sure that she had enough time for me. And if you don't have a sibling, you literally depend on your parents a lot for everything, right? You don't have anybody else to play with. So if you ask me, it's while there are a lot of women who've achieved so much, and I look up to all of them, my biggest inspiration will be from home only.
Yeah, great. Cool. So I'll ask you a couple of few questions, and I think some of them you've already answered. The first one is, would you, given a chance, would you have wished that Baidu should have been bootstrapped, or or do you think the current trajectory of getting investors is the right way to go?
We were actually completely bootstrapped until the launch of our app.
Yeah.
So so we were profitable. We had a very strong business model. In fact, we're profitable even today. So I think, you know, if you value money if you have a very strong business model, then it doesn't matter either. But we've been bootstrapped. In the beginning, we invested our profits back into our business, and then that's how we made it happen. The investments we've always taken has always been for the future, where to make it bigger, to add more products, to go to more geographies and all of that. But the current business model, and in India, we're already profitable.
Yeah, I think that Dr. Ranjan was one of the first investors, right?
Yes.
Ranjan, you were so proud of it.
Yes.
Yeah, I was so proud of the investment. Like, I'm so proud of it. I told him that even if I exit, I need some few little shares in the business. Yeah, good. And do you think IPO is good? I mean, would you want to go public, or would you like to go like this? What is your preference?
Yes, in the next few years, that's definitely a plan, because I think it's very inspirational to have an Indian company being listed out there. It's a dream for all of us. So I think right now we're working towards making things happen one day at a time. We're working towards our goals, and if things go the way we've planned, then definitely why not?
Yeah, and you only answered this question: work from home or work from office? What would you like to do? Don't look at COVID. Beyond COVID.
Beyond COVID, I actually miss office. Frankly, I miss my team. It's like my family. I also feel that it helps me create artificial boundaries for myself, because you know, I'm able to switch off from home for some time and completely focus on work. And when I come back from work, I'm able to switch off at least for some time and be completely at home. But then when you're at home, it's not impossible. It's a little harder. You have to create artificial boundaries for yourself. So if I have to choose between the two, I would love to resume going back to office, although it is very convenient to work from. It's very convenient, okay, because I can literally enter one meeting into another meeting in any part of the world with the help of one number, right? Just click and you're there. It is the most efficient way to work, if you ask me. But then just for the sake of being around people, because I'm a very big people's person, I miss my team. They're like I said, they're like my family. So I need to see them and be with them. Just for that sake, I think we need to go. In fact, I think, you know, we need to have one day at office just for us to get together and chit chat and then come back. Because when you do a Zoom call and then, or you know, any video call and then you work, you end up only discussing work. So yeah, I think that's it.
And the next question is, Baiju Ravindran as a co-founder or as a husband? What do you prefer? Or what do you like the most, or not prefer?
Yeah, I don't have. So I like, frankly, I'll tell you. I think when there is respect, you can make both happen. And you know, these things they always say in movies that opposite attract and all of that. But then in real life, you know, liking the same set of things, having the same kind of mission, being very goal oriented, all of that really makes it much easier to follow your dreams together. And I think for both of us, other than Byju's, our universe revolves around our son. So you know, if we're not discussing work, we're discussing him. So I think, you know, being aligned in what we do and having that amount of ton of respect for each other makes it easier. So I don't really think of it as you know, it's not two different roles, but then it's somehow for us it's together.
Okay, both, you like both.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, one of the companies that you in the new era, like the last 10-15 years, which you like the most, no? Which you really like a Flipkart or, you know, something like that, which really is really inspiration to other people. One of those companies which you like.
Not an Indian company, that's the issue.
It doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be, whichever.
So if you ask me, I've really liked the way Amazon, although I don't know whether it categorizes as a startup, but I love the way they
nowhere near a startup.
Nowhere near a startup, but one of the companies which I really like, because I feel the way they make a customer happy and want them to make them come back again and again and again. So I think that's because, see, the thing is, you can do branding, you can do marketing, but if you have to kind of if you have to sustain for a long term, you need your customers on your side, you need your end user on your side. And I think Amazon manages to do that in multiple ways, be it the way they handle their post sales, and so I think that's what sets it apart. So I really like Amazon for the work they do. So it's a company.
And great. And last question: given an opportunity, what would you like to do in your free time? Would you go do fitness-based activities, or would you take what is it that you like doing in your free time?
I love to travel in my free time, if possible, because I love to explore new places and people and cuisines and learn about the culture of different parts of the world. So I think it's a very standard answer, which most of the people will give you, but it's because every time when, like, in the pre-COVID era, because now it's pre-COVID, post-COVID, and during COVID, which we all talk about, I think we work very hard for like 7 days a week for say 3 to 4 months, and then we take a break for a week, we travel and we come back. So that's something that we really looked forward to, because every time you visit a new place, sometimes you go back to a place that you really like, and we get to know some people really well, and that gives you so much insight into their culture, and you understand the world through a very different perspective. So I think that this is kind of the right time to start up, because if you look at even the kind of statistics which are out there, startups which are launched during a downturn tend to be much more resilient. I think after the previous financial crisis, 50 unicorns were created from the last time. So I think this is like a great time for people to start up, because there is so much to solve. And if I talk about EdTech itself, because like I said, it's getting so much attention because of the impact it's creating, the awareness it has created. I think there is a lot of scope to change the way students learn, to help teachers teach seamlessly, and help institutions transition online. So there is so much that can be done in this sector. So I think it's a great time. But again, for any startup to succeed, I think the founders need to be extremely resilient. That would be one trait which I would always hold of maximum value, because there'll be so many challenges which will be thrown your way, especially in the initial days. There'll be ups, there'll be downs, but then if you have the go get it and be at it till you get it attitude, and if you strongly believe in your product, if you believe in it more than anybody else, and you know that you're going to create an impact, because tech does that, right? Tech has the ability to solve a problem, a need in society at scale. And if you believe your product can do that, I think no one can actually stop you. So this is what I think is what I would like to say to everybody who is trying to starting up. This is the right time to do it. And if you strongly believe in what you do, let your passion define you, and then there's no looking back.